You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking to Kersti Nieto, who is a dog trainer at Dog Training Camp USA in North Carolina. Welcome, Kersti.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. We have a question from the website. The question is, how do you know if your dog is in pain?
That's a good question. There are a lot of different signs that you can look for in your dog. I think, but the biggest thing is looking at your dog's whole behavior, and they start to act different from what they normally are. So sometimes that's a big indicator, and I can be much more specific. So if your dog is being more vocal than usual, say they're whimpering or whining and you can't really make sense of it, like they're just kind of in the house, not doing anything but whimpering a lot of times that can be an indicator, especially if it's paired with an action, like every time they step, they whine a little bit. But sometimes there is no action and it's just a little bit of vocalizing. So that's one way. If they're licking at a certain spot, so sometimes if they have like a cut on their paw or they've got a briar in them, they're going to lick at it to clean it or get it out. But sometimes when it's an internal problem, they'll lick a certain area because they're trying to fix it, but it's not really doing anything. So if you see them suddenly out of, your dog is 5 years old and he suddenly started to lick his left paw constantly, that can be a sign. Panting without exercise, say their breathing changes and it's suddenly faster or it might be shallower. Change in their appetite or their water intake. So if they start to refuse food or they're drinking tons more water than normal. Another good one is if they are having a hard time lying down. So say if they try to lie down but then get right back up and circle and reposition, or they just can't seem to get comfortable, that's a good indicator that something's wrong if they're kind of restless. Behavior changes in the way they seek attention. So if they're avoiding you, especially if you have a really outgoing, affectionate, happy-go-lucky dog and they just don't really want to have anything to do with you all of a sudden, or they're shying away or staying in their crate or just avoiding. And to be paired with that too would be growling or snapping if you get too close, because sometimes a dog in pain just wants people to stay away. Just one of these in the list could be kind of not important, but if you start to see a lot of them, or maybe a couple, those are big indicators that something's wrong. So it's always important to just kind of be aware of how your dog's acting, and if you feel like you might suspect something's wrong, watch for a little while, but definitely give your vet a call or go visit the vet, because you don't want something to get worse when they're showing symptoms. One of my dogs is super stoic, so if he gets hurt, he does not show anything. He will just keep trucking. One time we were at the beach and he stepped in some cactus. He got some cactus needles in his paw. Aww. And I had to look at him really closely because he was slightly limping. But any normal dog probably would have been screaming, but he just tried to keep walking and keep going. And when we found them, we actually did have to go to the vet because they were really deep in his paw. The only thing he did, he gave this really high-pitched, short little cry, and that was it. And so sometimes it's really difficult to determine if your dog's in pain. But if you have an instinct, if you have a feeling that something's off, it's better to go with that than let it fester into something more.
Sure. I've one of my vets said, especially with a lab or a golden retriever and even a pug who just all they want to do is eat. The minute they don't eat, make sure you bring them in.
Yeah.
And then
that can be scary. I've had a couple of my personal dogs do that. When they stop eating, that's a huge sign that something's wrong.
Yeah. And then the other one was, or another vet had said that Goldens, just like what you were saying, are super stoic. So they'll be in pain, but they won't let anyone know.
Yes.
Yeah. So
those are the hard ones.
Yeah.
They don't whine. They don't make any sound. They just kind of do nothing until you figure it out. One of my dogs, Forrest, he's a big he's a flat-coated retriever mix. And he is the most playful dog ever. He helps with my training dogs. He really helps dogs come out of their shell because he's just got this really happy personality. He can get anybody to play with him. Well, one day we went outside in the yard and he just went and laid down in the corner. And he had his ears down and he was acting really strange. And I thought, something's not right. This isn't him, especially for the dogs that I had with me. They were his best buddies, and he just didn't really have anything to do with them. So I brought him back inside, and he went and laid down in the house. And then a few minutes later, he threw up a giant antler.
Oh!
He had eaten it. and I have no idea how it happened, because I don't give dogs bones that are small enough for them to swallow. So this was a big antler, and he had swallowed it. It just went straight down his throat. And thankfully it came back up, because that would have been something terrible. But I always think about that. I'm like, yes, you can definitely see a difference in your dog when something's not right. They tell you in one way or another. But I always think about that. Oh man.
We had a black lab named Wrigley who swallowed a frozen squirrel.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that's the other thing, when all of a sudden, I guess that's another sign, when all of a sudden their eyes start to kind of explode out of their head and the stomach starts to whiten. I remember calling the vet, and the vet's like, come in immediately. So they took her in the back, and they had a intern doing it from UW vet school. And all of a sudden we hear this, whose black lab is this? And Dr. Myers ran into the back, and there was a frozen squirrel on the floor.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, these retrievers will get into anything.
Yes, and swallow it whole.
Yeah. And then on the other end, you have to really kind of know your dog, because Chuck the Pug will walk outside, and if it's below 20 degrees, we're not even at the end of the driveway, and he lifts up his paw like an actor. Okay, I'm done.
This is too much.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for being on the podcast, and we look forward to having you back.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.